Thank you very much. So before we start the panel discussion, I would like all the panelists to take 30 to 60 seconds just to introduce themselves and how they are involved in the Oman tourism and hotel industry, what projects they have perhaps, and what projects they have coming up as well. So if we can start from that end, Flavio.
Sure.
Just to...
Good morning, everybody. I'm Flavio Simonutti. I'm the CFO at the Omran Group. Omran is a state-owned entity owned by the Ministry of Finance, working together with the various stakeholders within the government, particularly Ministry of Tourism, for the purpose of enabling infrastructure investment, developments of tourism and tourism-related projects. We currently have many activities in progress. We are developing the Oman Convention Exhibition Center together with several components of complementary real estate. The JW Marriott and the Crown Plaza hotels are part of the plan. We have recently signed up a new agreement with Accor for a 3-star Abbey Styles. We have a portfolio of roughly 13, 14 different hospitality assets scattered around the Sultanate. We also have a series of joint ventures with several foreign partners for the purpose of involvement and government representation in ITCs, which are the integrated tourism communities and cities such as the Wave and projects in Sifa and Salalah, Ras Al Had, and Muscat Bay. So I look forward to an interesting panel discussion today. Thank you.
Very good. Engineer Mohammed.
Good morning, everybody, and I would like to welcome our guests in Oman who are coming for the first time, and the rest of you. My name is Mohammed Zadjali. I work for the Ministry of Tourism since the year 2009, November 2009. I've worked in different areas alongside with our colleagues. The Directorate General of Investment or Investor Services and Quality Management basically looks after the investment from scratch, from the beginning of the providing the statistics to the investors. And as Dr. Lubna explained previously, the strategy of Oman and all the details in that strategy is part in our department. We've seen a lot of investors in different areas to serve the tourism sector, starting from accommodation, restaurants, all the way to entertainment and sports activities projects. We are also developing a classification system for different rate of hotels. The ministry has developed its first classification system in 2004. This system has been revisited several times. The last time was in 2013. It is under revision as well. The idea is to cope with the international development and to keep it flexible with the needs in, as you said, Christopher, Oman has a diversity of different locations and cultural as well as environmental topography. So we always make sure that the location cope with the vision of the investor or the project itself. We also have a great area in quality control as well as tour guiding. There are many smaller areas. I don't think the time will be enough to go into all the details, but I'm willing to answer any question if any. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming here. Very honored and happy to be addressing such a distinguished audience. I'm Fabio Scacciavillani, and I'm the Chief Strategist of the Oman Investment Fund. Oman Investment Fund is a sovereign wealth fund. In other words, we manage a conspicuous part of the resources accumulated by the Omani government, and we mostly, but not exclusively, invest in Oman, in projects that are aimed at diversifying the Omani economy away from the oil extraction. We're involved in several projects related to the tourism sector. A number of hotels, for example, the Alila Resort in Salalah, a new resort on Jebel Akhtar, the Intercontinental here in Muscat, and other minor hotel initiatives. But we're also involved in the development of, say, medical city, which doesn't sound like something directly related to tourism, but you have to think that tourism has many dimensions. For example, medical tourism is an important and emerging sector. So, for example, having rehabilitation facilities here in Oman could be seen as a boost for the tourist sector. Other areas where we are heavily involved is the development of a large tract of land on the southern coast of Muscat. This is a massive project which could have, could be a game changer for the whole Muscat governorate and the Oman in general. And so we are one of the driving forces in the tourism sector, in investments in the tourist sector here in Oman, and we obviously work in close cooperation with Omran, with the ministry, and other key stakeholders.
Good morning, my name is Pascal Eppink. I'm Managing Director for Areej Hospitality. Areej Hospitality is a subsidiary of Golden Group Holding, which is a large real estate investor in all asset classes of real estate. And as Areej Hospitality, we take care of all the hospitality investments within the group. Right now, we are working on 14 hotel projects. We just opened one project a couple of months ago in Al Mouj, the Misk Hotel. Last year, we opened a small business hotel in Salalah by Deutsche Hospitality called Intercity. We will have this year an opening of a high-end luxury resort in Salalah, the Shaza Salalah. And the other 11 hotels are scattered, 8 of them in Muscat, some in Sohar, Duqm, and we're also doing a large ITC project in Salalah of 2 million square meter, where we will anticipate 3-4 hotels. We just finished the master plan and will commence soon with the first hotel in that project also.
Thank you very much. Seems like quite a lot of interesting projects that all of you have ongoing. I think it's a perfect panel for this discussion. First, where I left off the presentation is all about the opportunities in hotel investments in Oman, and also how it fits within the tourism vision, within the Tanfit plan. So perhaps, Flavio, maybe you could start as a semi-government entity as well. I'm sure you work a lot with the government in terms of synergizing your efforts with the tourism vision. So perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on.
Sure. Excuse me. I think it's quite important to put things into context. When you think of the tourism industry overall, and it's quite important to understand the role that the government plays. People have the tendency of comparing initiatives and strategies to what's happening in Dubai, simply because Dubai has proven to correct the inbound tourism agenda effectively. And in my view, one of the key principles that allow that is this synchronizations of the various stakeholders within the whole tourism agenda. So I think it's important to highlight what's happening currently in Oman through particularly the Ministry of Tourism. There are a series of initiatives under the Tanfit program, which aim to promote certain tourism sector. There is a key principle and identifications of requirements and challenges that I think most people are aware of. So it's a process. It's definitely a step in the right direction. I think there's a lot of good progress that is currently happening. And the perception is that most of the common issues that people tend to highlight as perhaps challenges are being addressed. So there are 16 initiatives, for instance, for the tourism sector, and each initiative has a separate committee with specific accountable authority and people that have to deliver. Private sector is involved, NGOs are involved, government entities are involved, ministries are involved, and there is a series of governance that has been structured in a way taken from the, I believe, the Malaysian Prime Minister Office initiatives. So the fourth sector, just to give you some context that have been highlighted by Dr. Lubnan earlier, nature and adventure, business, MICE tourism, leisure, recreation, and culture and heritage, they're all to be promoted by supporting some elements of activities. So there's a lot of regulatory requirements that need to be aligned. If you look at the challenges that people have often highlighted when asked why is the environment not perhaps promoting some certain activity despite the landscape being beautiful? How do you leverage that? So one is usually the business environment, transparency or the lack thereof, the difficulties in understanding where they get the information, how to set up business, the lack of certain attraction features is also another challenge that's always being highlighted. The participation of, which is mainly involved with employment law of Omanis and Omani youth in the hospitality sector, generally speaking, and the role the SME can play to improve that. These and many other challenges that have been currently addressed. I think it's important just to put things into context. There's a lot of effort by a lot of people, primarily led by government initiatives, towards fixing and improving the environment underneath that will hopefully enable private sector, because at the end of the day, in my view, entrepreneurs and private sector are the parties that should be tasked with the risk-taking initiatives of being involved and develop a lot of these features. But fair enough, government has to play its role in enabling that. So that's just a very general statement on some of the background initiatives that perhaps not everyone is aware of. It's happening in the country at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. So to then go on to the government side of things, Engineer Mohammed, in terms of, you deal probably with a lot of the investors that you meet during your work. In terms of who the investors are, what they are doing, do you see that there is synergy with the tourism vision? Do you see investments coming from outside more than inside the country, or is it still mostly domestic projects? What can you say about that, the type of investors and what kind of investments they have?
Thank you. Most of the investors are local from Oman, and they are very happy with the strategy 2040 for the tourism sector. I'll give you an example about destination, which is Salalah. In the previous, Salalah used to be Kharif or summer destination for the locals and GCC citizens. These days, the destination has turned from a seasonal destination into around the year, and especially during the winter time. There are charter flights which are coming directly to Salalah. The investors made the change as well. The strategy has also highlighted in the first master planning four mega areas, Sandam, Muscat, Dakhliya region, and south of Sharqiya. This is all happening together with the investors' vision as well. And we have received many requests, and we've seen a lot of presentations and requests to allocate lands as well as to approve drawings, whether it's for smaller projects or it's for the integrated tourism complexes. So the main challenge that the investors are facing, according to our experience, that the rigidity of law or the slow procedures. Tanfeed program, as mentioned, have gathered all government entities as well as the private sector key players. And we came all together as an outcome to go into the details of the process and revise the law and the rules or the steps period. The Ministry of Tourism have signed, along with Dhofar municipality and Ministry of Environment, a memorandum of understanding that they together finish get the approval or reply to the investor with comments with not more than 10 days. And this is mandated and committed, and a copy is going to the Minister of Diwan Court, just to make sure that this is a serious agreement and there is no changes in these periods, and everybody is committed to that. So the level of commitment from the government towards opening the door for investors, whether they are local or international investors, is well documented, and it's just a start. Everybody in the government well prepared for the coming period and the next stage. The oil prices are not always constant or stable. We should always have plan B and C. And the previous oil prices crisis have highlighted the red light and made everybody alerted, not only in Oman, around the world. And these are the initiatives that have came as a result.
So you see that with the Tanfeed program, that a lot of things will be made easier for foreign investors as well to come into the country and invest in the tourism industry, right?
That's true.
Yeah. And the question then would be, because obviously a key essence to the Oman tourism vision is to keep a sustainable, very high quality tourism market with high quality assets. How do you see, as part of the regulations and classification and all of that, how would you make sure that the foreign investors that do come do not just come to build a low quality asset to get some money and take it out of the country, but rather invest in the market and stay here for the long term?
Well, the good news that the majority of the investors that come and introduce their project are green or environmentally friendly projects. The challenges happens when there are, for instance, a very promising project by the beach, and the rule of the Ministry of Environment is to stay away from, 150 meters away from the beach to keep the beach clean and available for the public. At the beginning, there was some resistance from the investors, but when we sat down and explained why, all the investors accepted that, and this is just a simple example of how most of the investors are responsible investors, and they come with a huge investment and experience.
Thank you. And Now, in terms of, to continue on the topic of foreign investors, if I then go on to Fabio, you have a lot of hotel projects, even mixed-use developments within your firm. And what do you see in this regard in terms of interest from foreign investors to come to Oman? If you see a couple of years ago versus today, for example, and what do you expect in the next few years?
Well, there has always been a lot of interest from foreign investors, foreign operators. I mean, Oman has been always on the map. I receive every month a request for information, ideas, so everything related to tourism. So the interest is there. We need to channel that interest into something more concrete. For example, it would be interesting to form a REIT, like an investment vehicle, even for retail investors, which can then put money into the various initiatives in Oman. And what is lacking, and where there is some interest but not enough interest, is not so much in what I call the hardware of the tourist sector, which means the hotel and the accommodation, the real estate. Where we need to attract investors is in the software, if you wish, of the tourist sector. That is on the activities. Because when tourists come, then they want to do something. They don't want to stay in the hotel room. Some like to be in the beach, but not, you have to broaden the offer with, say, rock climbing, hiking, mountain biking, sailing, surfing, windsurfing, and so on and so forth. On this, we're still lagging behind. Even in activities like scuba diving, where there is where there are some players, the sector is not doing well enough. It's small initiatives, these scuba diving centers are not run very well. Same thing for, marine activities. It's all too fragmented and left to the goodwill of a few people. No, we need a more coordinated approach. We need, big player entering this sector. And that, I think, is the challenge for the future. Because in terms of hard infrastructure, I don't think we'll have huge problems. I mean, we definitely face problems, but they can be overcome. The last thing is to place Oman on the map of the tourist demand worldwide. And it's necessary to push hard on an advertising campaign. So everybody, I'm sure you know these slogans, Incredible India, Malaysia through Asia. We need to find a slogan that when people decide on a vacation, pops up in their mind and say, maybe I want to go to Oman this time. Because Oman is, and you need to associate the country to a concept, a feeling, an experience, something that, induces a person to choose Oman over the many other alternatives.
Okay. In terms of, Pascal, to go to you, you have a lot of hotels existing and, of course, forthcoming a lot of projects as well, both in Muscat, Salalah, etc. Now, when we look at the source markets of tourists coming to Oman, of course, globally, there is a huge increase, and in the region, if you look at UAE, even Saudi, which is expected, there's a huge increase in the two mega source markets, India and China. China is still quite small in percentage-wise in Oman, but it could potentially be a very big tourism feeder to the country. What do you see now and going forward in terms of the source markets and what's changing in that perspective? Traditional markets versus the new up-and-coming markets?
Well, definitely the potential is there for those mega markets, as you say it. I think Chinese market is quite specific because they have quite different needs, I would say. Oman, we see a lot of beach resorts being developed and so on, and I don't think Chinese are much interested in beach resorts. I see for the Chinese the best option probably a combination visit with the UAE. Because that combination of what we have to offer here in terms of nature, activities, experiences, combined with what Dubai has to offer, I think those joint combination works well for Chinese. Now, in terms of our own hotels, we develop mostly city properties and mixed use. Why also? Because our hotels are dry hotels. So our resort in Salalah is mainly focused on Middle East market, and we see that market growing as well. Of course, Indian market, we see that potentially growing a lot, specifically also once the big infrastructure projects of the OCEC and the airport, number of incoming flights from perhaps different destinations will add to the growth of those new destinations, of course. But also one thing I'd like to come back on what was mentioned earlier about the activities and experiences, which a lot of people say is lacking. A good thing that we are confident about is that in the Oman tourism strategy, it was mentioned about 87% of the funding will come from external investors, although the 12% which the ministry is funding is mainly covering a lot of those activities, and I think those are exactly the ones that will create more demand for the destination. I don't know the detail of the activities, but if I saw the breakdown of the investment of for the strategy, 12% is covered by the ministry or by the government, and a lot within that 12% is mainly those such activities and experiences, if I'm right.
The ministries have set out. This is the 2020 targets, which is part of the bigger strategy 2040. There is 1.8 billion Omani Riyal that has to be generated from private sector participation within the tourism industry. I don't have the data exactly where we are with that, but there are few measurable targets that the ministry have set out for the 2020 targets, which is just coming in a few years. They have already exceeded the number of incoming visitors. I think that the target was 2.7 million, and we're seeing it's I think in excess of 3 million at the moment. The contribution to GDP, I think to exceed 1 billion, I think 105 billion Omani Riyal. We're getting closer. I think it's under 1 billion at the moment, but we still have a few years to go. And the job generation of 21,000 was another one of these kind of shorter-term measurable targets that the authorities have set out. So, but I think the 80% you have mentioned, I've also read that as well. So the challenge is how do private sector find those opportunities? How do you connect with the private sector? What kind of marketing needs to be orchestrated to attract investments? And it's not just hotels, by all means. Hotels are an essential element because people need to have a place to stay. But leveraging all the other opportunities is where the private sector will come in. Domestic tourism is also an element of the program, which is in my view of extreme relevance. Just to give you some context for people who have had the opportunity to drive and travel around the Sultanate. You don't have that many opportunities for proper stop areas, areas to rest, areas to perhaps using the restrooms like as people need when they travel. So even at that very basic infrastructure level, there's a lot of initiatives in regulating and in some instances forcing the private sector to raise the standards. If you stop for fueling the car on your way to Salar or to Sur, wherever you're heading towards, it can happen that if you have to go for a short stop and trying to use the facilities, it's often a pretty bad experience. So these are the type of things, even though it's perhaps a pretty simplistic way of representing the bigger picture, that need to be addressed. So, and it's all aligned with regulation, enabling private sector, and ultimately raising the standards.
Flavio, you're mentioning about the outer areas of the country, when you go out of the big cities, developing the infrastructure there as well. Now, when we talk about the hotel and tourism projects in those locations that need electricity, water, whether it's up in the mountains, in the wadis, in the desert, what are the challenges for an investor? What challenges do they face, and how could the government or other players from the private sector contribute to making that easier to invest in those locations?
Mention it, the essential infrastructure has to be in place. Hotel investors and owners are typically financial investors. They're there to see returns on their investments, and they have to rely on the cash flows of the asset. So there have been instances, for instance, the Crown Plaza in Duqm that we built, or the Atana in Musandam, or the first Alila in Jebel Akhtar, that us, with the help of the government, we were able to deliver. That usually requires an extensive upfront investment, particularly in infrastructure, because accessibility, electricity, water is not available. So all of a sudden, the investment proposition for a greenfield project for any investors, it's very different. You have a much higher cost of running and operating, cost also of retaining hotel staff. For instance, in Jebel Akhtar, it's a very different proposition of retaining staff in a staff accommodation in Muscat. So you do see turnover of staff, operating costs are higher, and a lot of times you have to rely on different regional companies to help and accelerate certain infrastructure requirements. At times you rely on promises and hopes that water main pipes will be hooked up to the hotel, but that's not always the case. So these are all factors that are probably common in any jurisdiction around the world, that the more remote location, of course, are a lot more expensive to operate. And I think Oman has taken the right step of allowing a company like Omran, for instance, to kind of front some of the initial investments and help hopefully enable other, Jebel Akhtar is a good example. After the Alila was opened, the Anantara opened, even though there's still a lot of government involvement in that. There are other projects being launched, but that's part of the agenda, enable private sector to come in and invest.
Do you think the integrated tourism complexes will make it easier in that regard? Because if you build a bigger complex, you're building the access and the infrastructure for a bigger complex that has higher economies of scale, and the cost of that initial investment will be spread amongst perhaps various investors. Do you see that as one of the solutions for...
ITC is the key element of ITC is the resi portfolios. You have residential sales that will hopefully help balance all elements of development. So, and Mohammed will be probably better than me to talk about ITCs because he spearheads a lot of these initiatives. But there is a fine balance to attracting foreign investments with incentive of effectively making money out of residentials, but at the same time having to deliver a certain minimum obligation, usually with reference to hotel keys, could be golf courses, could be adventure parks, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the idea of the formula. But at the end of the day, if the upfront infrastructure investment to go to some very remote areas, even if you have an ITC license status, it might not still be enough. to encourage private sector to come in and put their own money into delivering utilities, waters, and roads, etc. That's very expensive investments up front.
Well, I mean, as a private investor, we have looked at several opportunities, and we've offered several plots in quite a few rural areas, etc., with beautiful locations and beautiful demand drivers in the area. But still, as you mentioned earlier, some of the numbers just didn't add up, so we ended up prioritizing some other projects in Muscat or Salalah. So it's a bit of a catch-22. We know as well that once the supply gets there with a brand, etc., it will drive traffic as well.
It's a chicken or the egg situation, almost. Engineer Mohammed, in terms of the investors that you speak to, where do they want to, with the focus on investing in hotels?
Beachfront.
The hardware and the software. Sorry?
Beachfront in Muscat.
Beachfront Muscat, that's the top.
That's the default request.
Easy access, great location, you have the beach.
All the services that mentioned are available, and that's a prime location, you know. And from the projection that you have shown in your presentation, it clearly shows the Muscat area takes the majority, or attracts the majority to build their projects. Beachfront everywhere is the attractive place, and I'm sure Areej or Omran would definitely start their projects wherever it's available, right at the beachfront. As I said, Salalah is an attractive place as well, and we are receiving more demand in Salalah. Jabal Akhdar is also a promising and growing slowly. The number of tourists has shown great, a steady increment. With more accommodation, I'm sure more tourists will visit these places. But as you know, the accommodation itself is not enough. It definitely needs attractions. The ministry have also worked along with the encouragement to build more or to present more keys in the market through the strategy, is to focus on adventure tourism, heritage tourism, cultural tourism as well. We've worked right from the fine-tuning the rules and regulations along with Ministry of Housing, ROP, Muscat municipalities, and others, to also cope with our strategy and pull them together with us to the same direction and same vision. This is a great challenge as well, because every ministry has its own priority, whether it's good or not, but they have mandatory and they have milestones. They have to provide services for the public as well. One of the examples is the Boucher Road to Al Amrat and the newly opened Batna Road. They were not designed to serve the tourism sector, but with the route that they have taken, it shown that there is a great opportunity for tourism or hospitality project as well. The Batna Road came closer to attraction points, and it might have slightly damaged some locations, but it opened a greater opportunity for bigger and more attractive areas. So with regards to the ITC, all the ITC mostly depend on the real estate sales, and where their profit come from, not from the hotel keys. And the ministry makes sure that the tourism integrated project or complex should remain and should start with the tourism side, which is the hospitality services. And we provide as a privilege a ratio of 1 to 2, and it sometimes goes to 1 to 4. One key versus 4 real estate units. And this kind of attracted more investors to come and study and put their feasibility study seriously in different locations outside Muscat. And the network, roads network, plays a major part in that. The electricity availability and water supply, these are the big challenges. But many investors are willing to invest in that and resell their services, whether it's water or electricity, to the neighboring towns and villages. And this is also available for the investor.
So real estate is one of the ways to fund projects as well, right? Selling apartments and villas in these ITCs.
Depends on its location, whether it's close to the services or not.
Other ways that can be used by investors in terms of raising money, getting investors on board as JV partners, how are other new ways that you could potentially raise money, whether it's from the public or private investors? Maybe Flavio, in terms of REITs, these kind of new ways to attract money.
Yeah, Fabio has mentioned REITs regulation and framework previously. I think that's quite key, which I believe was actually one of the town feeds initiatives to issue a regulation. REITs and other fund structures are very helpful in funding new liquidity pools to allow investors to put money into real estate assets, which are usually for the privilege of institutional investors, right? Pension funds and banks and companies that manage large funds are usually the usual suspects that at the moment are involved into real estate assets. REITs, it's the right formula, which is it's very common, and I'll say almost by default the preferred venue of funding and managing real estate portfolio in various advanced jurisdictions. So I think what the market has done here, they have looked at a few benchmarks. They've looked at, obviously, the IFC in Dubai, which has some recent experiences, but they looked at some of the Asian financial markets, Hong Kong and Singapore, and they tried to do a bit of a mix and effectively come up with what I would say, relatively flexible criteria for eligibility of the assets that can be channeled through REITs. So hospitality as an asset class, it's a good candidate for REITs. At Omran, we're currently exploring solutions around packaging up some of our portfolio of hotels into a REITs, and in whether it's a privately placed REITs or a listed REIT. There are ways of effectively reaching out to the wider liquidity of investors that typically would not participate in this type of large-scale investment requirements.
Okay. I think our time is almost up. I just have one last question to Fabio and Pascal. Now, the future is all about sustainable tourism and a progressive growth in tourism, and making sure that facilities are added as hotel keys are added to the market. Today, there's approximately 10,000 branded hotel rooms in the Sultanate, and there's another that have been signed, announced, not the plans, but actually signed. There's another approximately 9,500 keys that will come. Whether all of them will come on time, most likely not. Some might be delayed, some might be perhaps canceled. But there is a lot of supply coming in. What do you see that existing hotels will have to do, and what do these new hotels have to do to stay competitive, to make sure that the performance stays or goes better than the current market?
Well, for us, I mean, all the projects that we're undertaking now, we have done extensive studies to make sure that all the components we put together, they are completely market-driven. We have quite a few mixed-use facilities. But also, the way forward for us is that most of the hotels we develop, we outsource most of the food and beverage. We maintain the all-day dining and maybe the room service and banqueting with the hotel, but for most of our branded hotels, and the brands receive that quite positively, actually. So we engage experienced or specialized brands to operate the restaurants, for example. And on the existing hotels, I think, there is quite a few properties which require some modernization, so to say. I mean, you showed earlier the guest experience rankings. There is some work to be done in that field. It is not purely hardware, of course. There's a lot of software involved. But it may add some component to improvement also.
Tourism is a whole value chain. So it starts from somebody who sells the destination to a tourist in, say, Scandinavia, Russia, China, India, whatever. And that tourist has to take a plane, come here, get into an airport, go through customs, get to a hotel, and all the way down to the beach or to whatever activity he has chosen to do here. The key is to integrate, or at least better integrate, the various parts of this value chain. For example, demand is created by tour operator. In order to induce the tour operator to sell Oman as a destination, you need to give them a cut of the hotel business. So you have to sweeten the deal because you need to create the incentive to put Oman on the top of the preferences. It's not enough to come second or third. You have to come first. In order to come first, you have to beat the competition. In order to beat the competition, you have to be better than others. And in order to be better than others, you have to have somebody who works to that goal and gets rewarded, because nobody does charity, at least not in their work life. They might do it outside their work. So this is the key element that we need to understand, we need to work on. And again, the tour operator has an easier job to sell Oman rather than Malaysia, rather than Mauritius, rather than Seychelles, rather than whatever else, if the consumer has seen the name Oman somewhere on TV, on specialized, Condé Nast publication, and other things. So you need to create awareness in the prospective client. You need somebody who works on that awareness, and then you need to work all this. So that's the key challenge, because tourism today is an extremely competitive industry. Everybody in the world, this is one event that devoted to tourism. Probably at the same time around the world you have another 100 similar events which are discussing exactly the same issues on how to take tourists to, I don't know, Florida, Panama, Taiwan, you name it. So that's what we need to understand. We need to be not better, we need to be best. And in order to be best, we need to understand what it takes to take somebody from location A and bring him here and not somewhere else. So,
thank you very much.
In a nutshell, this is my
very interesting
contribution to the...
It seems like a lot of work is still ahead.
Yes.
Oman is at the crossroads.
And it's a never-ending job. You need to, for example, to get... we got, I know I shouldn't be saying this, so I hope that the press will not write it down. But let me be cynical here. We, as Oman, got more publicity from the tragedy of a DJ than all of the advertisement effort we've made in the past 1 year. So the name Oman came to the attention of the public as a tourist destination for an unfortunate event. But you see, that teaches us a lesson that we need to get somebody who is, how can I say, a name, has name recognition, who is a person with a following to endorse Oman, to say, I've been to Oman. I have, this, you have to create an aura of, glamour around the destination in order to, win over the competition in this tough environment.
Very interesting, and I think at that we'll leave it. There's a lot of food for thought. So I would like to thank all of you. Pascal from Areej Hospitality, Fabio, OIF, Engineer Mohammed from the Ministry of Tourism, Flavio from Omran. Thank you very much. Please give a hand for the panelists.
Yes. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Do we have any questions for any of our panelists? Yes, we have a question over there and even one over there. So can we have a mic to the gentleman over there standing near the door?
I just had two questions. One is about the Salalah hotels. I think the gentleman there from Ministry of the Tourism mentioned about Salalah being a potential basically destination. I just want to know the reason why. Second is about the dry hotels. How they can compete the dry hotels with basically the hotels that basically are providing the other basically food and beverages. That's the two questions I had. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Salalah became a destination because of the chartered flights as a start. And because there are available lands, huge lands, by the beach, because of the new airport, and because of the security in that region as well. And, the diversity of Oman opened the gate not only to Salalah. We have experienced an increment overall. If you look at the destinations all over Oman have been increased. We are highlighting Salalah because the strategy started with the master plan in Salalah. And what is the second question? Is it to me as well, or? The dry hotels. What's your question about the dry hotels? I can't hear you. Oh.
Sorry, just in terms of the competition, the dry hotels compared with the other hotels that basically provide other facilities. I just want to see how they can be competitive.
We have an example of a newly opened dry hotel at Al Moj, which is under the same group of Golden Group. And if there is a competition from non-dry hotels, they wouldn't have opened that hotel right next to the Kempinski. There is a demand for a dry hotel, not only in the GCC or Muslim countries, but we have experienced and we have seen some investors who are willing to open new dry hotels in Oman as a second and third branch of their international hotel in Europe and USA as well.
What's the attraction to the dry hotels?
I mean, if I may answer, because we have quite a few dry hotels. I mean, we have, as he said, there is first of all demand for people who want to have dry hotels. We work with a brand, Shaza, with whom we do 2, probably soon 3 hotels. They are specifically a dry brand created to accommodate that demand and that market. However, for us, most of our hotels are city business properties because we do know as well that for leisure beach resorts, a lot of demand comes in from Europe, and a lot of them, they may not demand a dry hotel. So that's why our majority of supply and inventory is city center hotels and business properties, whereby the need of alcohol is proven to be much less. As I said earlier, all our inventory is based on market-driven studies, etc. And as the gentleman mentioned, the MISC opened in November, and we don't see any occupancy failures there. The hotel is running at very high occupancy for its first year of operation. So we don't see it being an issue.
Great. Okay, if that answers the question, we have to wind up this panel discussion, although I'm sure many of the audience members do have additional questions. I saw a few other gentlemen raise their hands, but we have to wind up at this moment because we're a little bit behind schedule. But gentlemen, thank you very much for spending time with us and sharing your insight. I'm sure you'll be available offline. All of our speakers will be available during lunch and even beyond to address any questions that you might have, so they're always going to be here. And to thank you as a token of our appreciation for spending time, we would like to hand over a memento. Gentlemen, if you could stay on the stage. Flavio. Engineer Mohammed, our guest from the Ministry of Tourism, Oman. A memento for Fabio as well. Memento for Pascal. And last but by no means the least one for our moderator, as well as our speaker,